Now available in paperback and Kindle, All About Marilyn. Learn all about the struggles of a faded former teen sitcom star in this absolutely fabulous 5-star screenplay. Get All About Marilyn in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com today. On Monday, the Writers Guild of America decided to go on strike against movie studios, TV studios, and streaming services. Now, this is the third time that the Writers Guild of America has gone on strike in my lifetime. The first two times they went on strike was in 1988. The second time was in 2007. And this is the third time. And it looks like to me that the main reason that the writers are going on strike has to do with compensation for streaming services, and also to get better standards for many of the streaming services productions, where a lot of writers have been exploited by many of these on these streaming service platforms. Now, the Writers Guild believes that these studios really need to get things together as related to compensating its members, because a lot of their members are being exploited as they see it by these streaming services, which are an extension of the big four media platforms. So a lot of the writers want to try to get better compensation for their members as related to the evolving entertainment industry. And this is a place where the big four may be in some trouble, because if they do not make a resolution to this strike, there may not be an entertainment industry as we know it. Because in 2007, when we had a Writers Guild strike, it basically devastated the television marketplace, and it led to the cancellation of multiple shows like Jimmy Smith's Cane. Many of those shows, where they were in production and they had ran out of scripts, and once the strike went on, what happened was the studios could not afford to bring those shows back to production because they had lost so much money. And since they had lost so much money, they could not bring these shows back to production. And this was something that was done on, a devastating level in 2007. And it was far worse than what happened in 1988, where the only casualty was Kate and Allie. But this time, it could have a ripple effect in an industry that is just starting to recover from the losses that they have been taking since the pandemic and a string of box office and television failures. So it is imperative for the executives in Hollywood to resolve this deal with the Writers Guild of America, because if they don't resolve this deal with the writers, there may not be a Hollywood left standing as we know it, because as things have evolved as related to the digital world of entertainment, television and movies are becoming less relevant to the American viewer, and a prolonged strike could lead to people adapting to new forms of entertainment, such as many of the YouTubers that are out there, because every day that the strike goes on and we head towards the summer, what could happen is this could lead to the studios not having enough scripts in place, and what could happen is viewers' habits could completely shift like they did in 2007, because what happened in 2007 was many of the viewers just started watching many of the people on the burgeoning digital platforms such as YouTube, and instead of watching their favorite shows, what happened was many viewers started watching YouTubers more regularly. And in addition to that, we had the TV going digital in 2009, and the TV going digital in 2009 further accelerated the migration of people from television to YouTube. And what happened was Hollywood wound up becoming behind the eight ball as related to controlling the narratives of entertainment, because what happened to Hollywood was, as people went out here and TV went digital, people had no reason or incentive to go out here and keep watching TV once the signals for analog were cut, and they had to go out here and buy converter boxes or buy new TV. So Hollywood is reeling from a lot of bad business decisions that they lobbied for from the U.S. government as related to TV going digital, and they're still dealing with those losses that are now compounded by a pandemic and a series of box office failures due to what some call social justice type narratives in their media. So it is imperative for them to settle this strike as soon as possible, because they may not even have an industry if they don't pull things together. Now, the things that the writers are asking for, as I see it, are fairly reasonable, because this is going to secure not only the jobs of the writers, but secure the jobs of multiple individuals who work on productions, people like carpenters, people like set decorators, people like grips and best boys, and people like assistants, people like those people who work for the in the writer's room. This is all about trying to secure those jobs that will allow the entertainment industry to continue to go on. And the writers are not, again, as I see it, asking for much. I mean, all they're asking for is fair compensation for content that is presented on streaming services, and that's just something that I believe they should be compensated for, because these streaming services like Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu pull in billions of dollars, and these writers deserve compensation because they have gone out here and created this content. And when I heard about how many of the writers on these streaming services don't even get royalties for their work, yeah, they've got to go on strike, because you deserve compensation for the content you produce. I mean, you deserve content for the content you produce, because YouTubers are paid per view as related to our videos. And a writer who goes out here and writes a script, they deserve to be compensated for the work that they do every time somebody watches one of these shows on a streaming service, because people pay for subscriptions for these services, and a writer deserves to be paid every time this episode is watched. So this was an issue that was of contention back in 2007 as related to digital platforms, and back then they were only talking about DVDs and Blu-ray, but we are at a point with streaming where these shows are basically shown every day, and some of them are shown on free platforms like Tubi, and advertisers are paying for that content to be on platforms like Tubi. So if these streaming services are going out here and presenting this content and getting paid by advertisers, then yeah, writers deserve compensation for their work if it's presented on one of these streaming services, because every writer who, again, works on these scripts, they deserve to be paid for all of the work that they have done, regardless of what platform it moves and migrates to. Those writers deserve to be paid fair compensation for their hard work, and they deserve to be compensated as related to the number of times it's played, because sometimes that's the only way you're going to even make a living later on in your career. Now, another issue that the writers have is related to them being able to get work, because with these streaming services, there's a real problem. There was a time when a writer could come in through writing a spec script, which is a script that was unsolicited, and you could do 1 or 2 episodes and get paid and be able to make a living in LA. Unfortunately, what's been happening is a lot of writers, they haven't been able to get in the door through the unionized system of the WGA, and you're getting a lot of non-union writers coming in, and they just write stuff and they don't understand their rights, and they're getting taken advantage of by these prodcos who make content for these streaming services. So that's another issue that the Writers Guild is having with a lot of these production companies. What's happening is that writers are not really getting paid for their specs, and they're not getting compensated as related to those spec scripts or even being able to get in. Now, this has led to a complete change in what they call the writer's room, and a writer's room is a group of writers that are hired to come together and write the scripts for a show, or in some cases they use them on movies, but usually they use them on television. And usually when it comes down to the writers' rooms, you used to get a dozen writers working in a writer's room, but these days a writer's room is barely 4 to 8 writers. And what happens is that those writers don't really have any rights, especially on the streaming service production companies. What happens is that short writer's room, usually those people work on scripts, but then they don't wind up getting any credit for anything that they're doing, and they also don't get compensated in the way that they should get, because on an old school TV show, what happens is that the studio and the network go out here and order 26 episodes for a full season, or they order a half season of 13 episodes, and when they order that half season or that full season, they have to pay that full writer's room their full wages. So a writer's room of 12 writers, they could go out here and get paid in a standard production. And even if they don't even air the episodes on the mainstream, they would have to go out here and air them in other platforms like syndication or on DVD or streaming, and they would have to go out here and use those episodes. So those episodes the writers would be paid for them. But in the case of these shortened writers' rooms, what's happening is a lot of television and screenwriters are being taken advantage of. So with the whole thing with the writer's room, they shorten the writer's room because they say, oh, on a Netflix show, we're only ordering 10 episodes, which is below the 13 that were ordered for syndication, because back in the day, a half season or a 13 episode syndicated run, that was considered enough to have a full writer's room, and you'd have to pay full compensation. But under this Netflix style model, where you're only making 8 to 10 episodes, many people believe they only have to hire maybe 4 to 8 writers, and they don't have to pay those writers, and they don't want to pay them residuals for their work, even though their work is getting millions of views on platforms like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or one of the other streaming services. Even though their shows are getting views, they don't want to pay these writers what a writer used to make on a standard television production back in the 70s or the 80s. Now, what's happening is that the Writers Guild wants to go out here and again set up rules for this, because they see a lot of newbie writers coming in and they're being taken advantage of. Now, a lot of these newbie writers, this is something that Comics Matter, your boy Zach, talked about. A lot of these aspiring comic writers who think that they're going to get this Netflix deal, and what happens is these people, they're green, they're naive, and they don't know the business, and they go out here signing away their lives. And when they sign away their lives, what happens is this erodes the ability of other writers to go out here and negotiate a deal where they can get fair compensation for their services. So we've got a lot of green writers out here, like those who were working on the She-Hulk show and many others. A lot of these people were extremely inexperienced. They were not aware of their rights as related to the union, and because they came in as basically non-union writers, they were not being able to get compensated for their work the way it was supposed to be. And that started from minute one, because their writer's room wasn't filled with seasoned, experienced people. And because their writer's room wasn't filled with seasoned, experienced people, the studio basically was able to get their scripts for basically nothing and wouldn't have to pay them any royalties at all. So this is something the Writers Guild had to put their foot down on, because they saw, yes, streaming is big, but streaming is taking advantage of too many writers, and too many writers are not getting the fair compensation that they deserve as related to the productions that they work on. So you've got a lot of writers out here working on many of these streaming projects, and some of them may go a season, some of them may go 2 seasons, some of them may even be movies, and a lot of these people are being paid up front. but they're not going to be paid in the long term because of the contracts that they sign, and that's something that the WGA wants to rectify, because if it continues to go on, then there's not going to be much wealth built for writers, and if there's not much wealth built for writers, then there's not going to be much incentive for a screenwriter like myself to want to go out here and put fingers to the keyboard for a project, because if there's no compensation for that project as related to residuals long term to take care of us long term, then we cannot go out here and continue to create projects in the short term. I may have screenplays that may sell, but the whole thing is that if I can't sell anymore and get a good price for those scripts, then I have no incentive to keep writing these scripts, and that's what the Writers Guild is striking about this time. And Hollywood really needs to understand how dangerous the ramifications are, because they're coming off two bad box office seasons, 2021 and 2022, which were not that great, and with them just starting to rebuild some momentum for 2023, then they really need to get it together and make a deal and give the writers the money that they are deserving as related to the rights that writers should have, because if they don't do it this time, they may be in for a worse predicament than what happened in 2007. Now, 2007's writer's strike was devastating to Hollywood, because Hollywood was taking major losses. I mean, I never saw this many shows get canceled. I remember the '88 writer's strike and how rough that was. And while it was rough, they only said they had one casualty, which was Kate and Alley, which ended in '89. But in 2007, I saw multiple shows get canceled, and I saw multiple projects get canceled, because even though a project does get greenlit, it takes a lot of money to get that project into production, and every day that a project is stopped, that there's money getting lost, because when you start a production, you still have to pay to maintain certain things. You have to pay to maintain things like locations. You have to pay to maintain things like wardrobes and things like that, and maintaining stuff. And oftentimes what happens is that your budget completely runs out. And if your budget runs out, then you don't have a way to continue financing a show or a movie. And what happens is that all of that money winds up getting lost, and you cannot just pick up and get more money. No, once that money is gone, that money is gone. And this is something that Hollywood really needs to think about. I mean, you just came out of the pandemic. You've had 2 bad years as related to your box office. You've suffered major losses, and the money that you would pay a writer to work on a project, that's nothing compared to the money that Hollywood is hemorrhaging right now. I mean, you have studios like Disney and Warner Brothers that are just limping along. So they need to make a deal sooner rather than later, because what the Writers Guild is asking for on many of these streaming productions and other productions is that there's a full writer's room. And yeah, you do need a full writer's room, whether it's 8 episodes or 10 episodes, because I've watched many of these Netflix shows and Amazon shows, and the quality of the writing really suffers. And it suffers because you've got a lot of unqualified writers who are not WGA certified. I mean, when I look at shows like She-Hulk and many of the other Disney Plus shows, the quality is just not on the level of a good television show from the 80s, where you had union writers going out here and putting together scripts. When you had union writers putting things together, you had a much tighter script. You had better developed characters. You had storylines that flowed well together. But when you have a non-union script group of writers and they are inexperienced, you get shows like She-Hulk, you get uneven shows like Jessica Jones, and you get shows that are not as tight as they should be. So I understand what the union wants to do. They want to help improve the quality of the writing, because the writing is the foundation of a television show. The writing is what everybody else builds on. Without the writing, the executive producer doesn't have a concept to pitch to get greenlit. Without the writing, you don't have a story that the executive producer can envision. You don't have a story that the director can go out here and tell a story with. And without a writer, you don't have work for people like best boys, grips, and set decorators, and other people like stage handlers. You don't have work for all of those people. So it's just smart to go out here and pay your writers what they deserve, and pay them and make sure that they're getting royalty checks for all of their work, because it's going to cost Hollywood a lot of money. Because if they don't get a deal done, this may be the thing that ends Hollywood as we know it. Because while America's entertainment is changing as related to digital, what's happening is that more and more people are migrating to YouTube channels, and they would rather watch their favorite YouTuber at 8 p.m. like they do me, rather than sit there and watch one of these television shows where the writing has basically fallen off, or one of these streaming services where the writing has been mediocre to subpar. So Hollywood really needs to get out here and pay its writers what they deserve, because if they don't pay their writers, they may go to become a footnote as related to American entertainment, and they may become a footnote in the 21st century because they're not looking to pay their writers what they deserve. And they really need to go out here and put that money on the table to pay their writers. And they need to pay their writers what they are worth, because a good writer is worth millions of dollars as I see it. Because with a good writer, you can go out here and not only make a good movie or a good TV show, but that writer can go on and make TV shows and movies that can go on for decades and make a studio lots of wealth. And they can also go out here and make things like licensing and merchandising. I mean, a writer brings a lot of wealth to these studios. So you need to pay your writers, and you need to pay them if you want to stay in business. That's my advice to Hollywood after experiencing two writer strikes and seeing the damage that the 2007 writer strike did, which was compounded by 2009's transition to digital, which has been a disaster for television because TV never really recovered from those two things. And with TV not recovering, it's basically a revenue stream that is dying as a result of Hollywood just miscalculating as related to the Telecommunications Bill of 1996. And with them not being a big four and not having any competition, what's happening is that the face of media is changing, and Hollywood is way behind the 8 ball, so far behind that they're not seeing where they're going, and they are so far behind that they don't understand that if you don't pay your writers and you allow the strike to go on for the time that it did in 88 or 2007, we may not have a movie or TV industry for anybody to sell scripts to. I mean, this strike could be as devastating as the one that put Hostess out of business, because Hostess thought, oh, we couldn't adapt to the changing snack market, and what happened was they didn't want to pay their union workers, and Hostess went out of business. Their whole company went bankrupt, and they were bought by McKee Foods, and now there's no more, a lot of great Hostess products like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pies, which were already discontinued, but other types of products no longer are on the market. And again, all because those management didn't want to go out here and compensate people fairly. If you have a business, again, you have to pay your people fairly, because when you pay people fairly, they can go out here and create work. And Hollywood has been exploiting a lot of people as related to the streaming services. They have been taking advantage of a lot of people because they're young and naive and inexperienced, and all they're thinking about is getting a Netflix deal. But you really want a deal with WGA protection, because a deal with WGA protection, you're going to get all of your royalties. You're going to be paid as related to every time somebody clicks on one of these shows, and instead of you just getting paid a flat rate and then nothing afterwards, you're getting everything that you're supposed to get. And you're also working in a writer's room with seasoned writers who have protections. And again, those writers can help you build and develop your career. And again, I can understand why the Writers Guild is going on strike this time, because there's been a lot of exploitation of writers as related to many of these streaming services. And there's been a lot of exploitation as related to digital media. A lot of people have been taking advantage of writers and aspiring screenwriters, and a lot of them, like Richard Meyer talked about in many of his videos about how they want the Netflix deal, they go out here, they think, oh, I'm getting this option, and not understanding you just sold your whole concept for small change, and you're not going to be able to get the full compensation you're supposed to get. These people are getting your project, getting your story, getting everything that you own for pennies on the dollar, and they are out here. You're getting no residuals. You're getting nothing at all. While you get the attention of Hollywood, Hollywood is taking advantage of you. And a lot of these people, they go into deals not even having an agent, not even having any sort of entertainment lawyer to go out here and talk, speak, and advocate for them. And they're making these deals, getting these shows made. And while they're getting caught up in, oh, I'm a showrunner and I'm a big guy in this production for 8 to 10 episodes, they're missing out on all the compensation they would have got if they made 13. Because if you made 13, you would have gotten all of your compensation. But they give you this shortened 8 to 10 episode deal so that they can shortchange you at the end of the day. So this whole deal with the writers' strike, this time I gotta stand with the writers, because with digital platforms, every writer deserves to be compensated the same way YouTubers are compensated. I mean, YouTubers, every time there's an ad on, we do get paid for our views, and writers and Hollywood deserve to be paid the same way for the scripts they produce, for the content that everybody watches. Now, if you want to pick up my screenplay books, All About Marilyn and All About Nikki, you can find both of those scripts on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And if you want to pick up some of my other SJS Direct publications, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, along with my sorority novel, The Thetas, and my vampire novel, Eternal Night, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them in digital format at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos about the entertainment industry, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, All About Nikki, a fabulous first season. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meets Clueless in this absolutely fabulous African-American 1990s teen sitcom. Get all 13 episodes of All About Nikki, the fabulous first season, in paperback and e-readers today.